So why is this significant? Well, because people are leaving the workforce. It is estimated that almost 40% of government employees right now are either at retirement age or close to retirement. 40% of government employees. The other important statistic is that people over 50 consume less than people under 50. You all can relate to that. I can relate to that. We have 4 children. When our 4 children were growing, I couldn't wait to go deposit that paycheck to my bank account to cover all of the expenses we have for our family. Today, I get paid, I go put it in the bank. Your mortgage is paid for, you've got your furniture, you've got your clothes, you've got your jewelry, you've got most everything. So the older that you are, less you're going to spend on consumer products. Does that make sense to you? It makes sense to me, and statistically, that's true. Right now, you've heard headlines about the status of the funds available to pay our Social Security obligations. So if we have more people under Social Security, we have to have more money. And when you first started this actuarial study about, well, how many people we're going to have in America, how much money we're going to need, all of those things, one of the things and one of the factors they input into this analysis is what the money you're putting out there in your reserve accounts is going to earn. Who would ever think that money isn't worth anything today? So then there's stress. There's not only stress that there's more are going to be needed, there's stress as to where is the investment income going to come from to be able to keep up with an actuarial liability that is out there. Who's going to replace those people in the workforce? Another thing that a lot of people don't pay attention to is who's going to care for the aging Americans. I had the privilege of caring for my 2 parents. My father had a stroke at age 80, and of course modern medicine now, he stayed with us for 6 more years under constant care. My mother suffered from Alzheimer's. She was institutionalized for 12 years. Do you know that every time I would go see him, and that was almost every day, I almost had to reintroduce myself to the caregivers. America has not been fortunate enough to recruit enough of our American people to want to become healthcare providers. So there's a lot of attrition in that area. So as more and more of us get to that age and have that need, the more pressure it is for us to find the necessary people, to help them. Another thing, and we have Commissioner Scott Crane. Scott, good evening. Thank you for being here. When I was mayor, we passed an exemption to help all 65 and older citizens of McAllen freeze their taxes. Okay? And this was very popular throughout the state. And in fact, many cities, many government agencies did this. Okay? I voted yes with my eyes closed and my hand in my heart, okay? Because I knew where we were going with the aging of America, okay? So when these companies or these cities who depend on ad valorem taxation, and you look at our school districts in other areas, how much of this is going to affect your future ability, your ability to raise revenues in the future. I'm going to go on to the next area and talk about our federal debt. As I was preparing my information, it so happened that this was February the 12th of this year. GOP backs away from debt fight. Okay? It seems like every time that Washington gets together, the first thing on the agenda is should we borrow more money? The Republicans will tell you that they want to do the right thing and put a stop to it, but it's very difficult because who wants to be the party that is going to stop government? So you have to give in because politically it would almost be political suicide. Okay? But we all have to ask ourselves as Americans, how much are we willing to borrow? Because if we don't make that decision, there is going to be a point in time in the future that decision is going to be made for us involuntarily. People won't lend us any more money. When the rating agencies are thinking of reclassifying the American government's credit rating, that is not a good sign when you already have the highest credit rating that you can possibly have. Okay? So as I sit here and I look at the federal budget, in 2012, they had $2.469 billion worth of revenues compared to almost 3.6 in expenses. $1 trillion in 1 year deficit. Now, why is that information important, and why should it be important to you? If the government has to spend $1 trillion more than what it's receiving in revenues, what makes anybody think that somewhere in the future there's going to be excess revenues to pay the debt? If our revenues are coming, almost half of them from the income tax of individuals, what makes anybody think that there's going to be more revenues in the future to pay that debt? So, I'm even afraid to use this phrase, but I can't call it any other thing other than the Ponzi scheme. Okay? So the reality of it is that somewhere in the future, the federal government is going to have to stop borrowing money, and someone is going to take a hit. I'm going to come back to this a little later on. But let me see if I can go backwards. Okay. Let's look at the non-employed. There are people out there that are receiving disability payments from the federal government. There's veterans. There's government employees. There's the older Americans. There are a lot of people dependent on the government check. Okay, the next area that I want to go into is the impact of not having comprehensive immigration reform in the United States. And I want to tell you why I think that's important for us. In 2006, which is the information that I have, I'm sure it's dated, but every year follows almost in the same pattern. 49% of all graduates with a PhD degree from American universities and colleges were foreign students. Very few had the opportunity to stay in the United States because we didn't have enough legal visas for them to stay. Well, why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because of two things. If they're not going to stay here, we're not going to benefit from the human capital of arguably pretty smart people. I don't have a PhD.